Alan Wake is one of the more singular narrative-driven action thriller psychological horror games of its generation. It combines atmosphere, supernatural horror, literary metafiction, and the push and pull of light versus darkness in a way that is ambitious, moody, and sometimes frustrating, but often unforgettable. Its episodic structure, 6 main episodes and post-game DLCs, The Signal and The Rider, allow it to build suspense, weave mystery, and leave certain threads ambiguous. Over time, the game has become a cult classic, admired for its storytelling, setting, and weirdness, even as its gameplay, combat, and pacing shows its age. Developer Remedy Entertainment, known for their Max Payne series. After Max Payne 2, Remedy wanted to create a new IP, something that fused cinematic storytelling with psychological horror. The inspiration was drawn from Stephen King's horror novels, David Lynch's Twin Peaks, Alfred Hitchcock films, shows like The Twilight Zone and The X-Files. The game's setting, Bright Falls, was inspired by the Pacific Northwest, evoking eerie forests, small towns, and misty lakes. Remedy began conceptual development in 2004 with a working title centered on a troubled writer and surreal horror. The game opens up with a nightmare sequence, a brilliant bit of foreshadowing that immediately establishes the central theme of a writer trapped in his own story. The player, as Alan Wake, drives along a twisted road and seemingly kills a hitchhiker. The nightmare progresses into a struggle with an axe-wielding version of the hitchhiker, forcing Alan to flee to a lighthouse. He's guided by a benevolent figure and learns the basic mechanic of using light to defeat shadows. This dream primes both Alan and the player for the horrors that lie ahead, blurring the lines between fiction and reality from the very beginning. Alan Wake and his wife Alice arrive in the sleepy, misty town of Bright Falls, Washington. They are here to help Alan overcome a 2-year case of writer's block, which has strained their marriage. The idyllic small town charm feels instantly unnerving, a familiar trope that Remedy uses to great effect. On the ferry, Alan and Alice have a conversation. Alice asks Alan to stand next to an old man at the railing so she can take a photo with the town in the background. Alan does this. The old man is Pat Main, a local radio host who knows of Alan's reputation and suggests doing an interview. Alan declines. Alice and Alan arrive in Bright Falls. They leave the ferry in their car. They go to the Oh Dear Diner. Inside, Alan meets Rose Marigold, a waitress and a fan of his writers, who flirts with him a bit. He sees locals giving him strange looks. There is a cardboard cutout of Alan in the diner, showing that the town is aware of him. He tries to find Carl Stuckey, the owner of the cabin they will stay in. Rose says Stuckey is in the restroom. Alan follows back corridors to the men's room. There is a woman in widow's weeds. She gives Alan the key to the cabin, saying Stuckey is too ill to meet him. As Alan leaves the diner with Alice, Carl Stuckey comes out, calling out that Alan forgot the key. Alan and Alice drive to a remote cabin that is on an island, Diver's Isle, in Cauldron Lake. Alan explores outside while Alice waits inside because she is afraid of the dark. Alan senses something strange, footsteps above, an old feeling, a sense reminiscent of his nightmare. In the cabin in the study, he discovers a shoebox of old poetry books by a writer named Thomas Zane, someone he doesn't remember hearing of. Alice reveals to Alan that the reason they came up here was for Alan to see Dr. Hartman, psychiatrist specialized in artists, to try to help him with his writer's block. She presents him with a surprise, a typewriter. Alan is angry, suspects she is trying to get him committed. They argue. Alan leaves, storming off, walking outside on a wooden bridge. He trips. The lights in the cabin flicker out. Something in the darkness is there, but not clearly seen. Alice screams. Alan sees something at the lake surface. Alice is sinking into the lake. He dives in after her. Alan wakes up behind the wheel of a car, teetering on the edge of a cliff. He is alone. Alice is missing. He is injured, disoriented. He searches the car trunk and finds The Creator's Dilemma, a book by Dr. Hartman, confirming some of the things Alice told him. With no working phone, Alan decides to make his way to a gas station he sees in the distance, hoping to get help. As Alan walks through the woods, he is stalked by a shadow creature, the Taken. He must use his flashlight to burn the darkness around him. He travels through multiple logging camps. In one office, he finds a revolver, flashlight, ammo. But when trying to call for help, a bulldozer smashes into the office and knocks him out, forces him to flee. He crosses rivers, walks over log bridges, uses safe havens, places illuminated, to rest or heal. There are markings, arrow, yellow light, sensitive paint that guide him. Carl Stuckey appears multiple times, sometimes possessed. Eventually there is a boss-like confrontation with Stuckey. After this, Alan pushes forward toward the gas station. Alan arrives at the gas station. It's in disarray. Something happened. Inside the gas station, a telephone is found. Alan tries to call the sheriff's station. Before he can say anything substantial, weird supernatural phenomenon interrupt. Sheriff Sarah Baker arrives, and during conversation, Alan tells her that Alice has gone missing from the cabin. The sheriff reveals that Divers Island, the cabin's island, supposedly sank into Cauldron Lake in a volcanic eruption in the 1970s. No cabin or island exists on the lake. Alan insists that it does. 3 years prior, in Alan and Alice's apartment in New York, Alan returns from buying groceries while a blizzard rages outside. Alice is working in her study. She shows Alan mock-ups for his upcoming book cover. Alan compliments him, then the power suddenly goes out. They light candles, the scene becomes intimate. Alice asks Alan to tell her a childhood story. He tells her about the clicker, a small light switch his mother gave him to help him with nightmares. The ideal is, whenever he was afraid in the dark, he could click it to make the light, and thus push back the darkness. He gives the clicker to Alice so she can have it. This sets up a motif, light versus darkness, not just physically, flashlight, ambient, supernatural, but emotionally, psychologically. The clicker becomes symbolic. Back in the present time, Alan is at Bright Falls Sheriff Station. He is being checked by Dr. Nelson due to his headaches and memory lapses. Alan insists he needs to keep searching for Alice rather than go to the hospital. He then meets with Sheriff Sarah Baker. Then after that, Alan receives a phone call from an unknown person. Alice's voice is heard in distress. The caller tells Alan to follow instructions if he wants to see Alice again. The mysterious caller tells Alan to go to the back lot of the station to a dilapidated truck where the caller has left something. Something to convince him that they're on the same page. Also, he must meet at Lover's Peak in Elderwood National Park at night. They warn Alan that he's being watched. Alan follows the directions through cell blocks, corridors, the back lot. Along the way, he interacts with a drunken prisoner, Walter Snyder, who tries to get Alan to turn the lights on in the corridor. This shows how darkness literally and metaphorically affects people. At the truck, Alan finds Alice's driver's license, confirming the kidnapper has control or has been truthful in part. Then Barry Wheeler, Alan's agent and friend, shows up at the station. There is tension. Barry is frustrated. Alan is desperate and volatile. Meanwhile, Dr. Hartman, the psychiatrist specializing in artists, reappears in the picture, offering help or at least claiming to. Alan punches Hartman after he tries to explain. Alan and Barry go together to Elderwood National Park. On the way, they stop by the visitor center. They meet Rose Marigold and also Rusty and Max, a ranger and his injured dog. Some local flavor is established. Rose is a familiar face. Barry expresses skepticism about Alan's story. The park becomes a stage for supernatural weirdness, empty cabins, TVs turning on by themselves, signs of the taken presence. At the visitor center, Alan finds Rusty badly injured from something supernatural. Rusty found manuscript pages that predicted what was going to happen. Rusty urges Alan to turn on the lights because of the darkness. The Taken are coming back. Alan also gets his revolver. When Alan attempts to restore power, he finds the circuit breaker has been destroyed. Outside, he sees liquid darkness pulling in a few places, from which Taken emerge. He fights off Taken hunters. Inside, Rusty disappears, replaced by a Taken version of himself. Traveling further along the nature trail, Alan is increasingly beset by Taken. The environment is hostile. Caves, ravines, collapsing cable cars, bridges, storms of Taken birds. At a cable car crossing, Alan's vehicle is attacked by Taken crows. He loses his weapons. He is rescued by a stranger who helps kill or fend off the Taken using flares and flashlight. Alan realizes the stranger is someone he saw earlier on the ferry when he and Alice arrived in Bright Falls, and deduced this man is the kidnapper, or at least the person holding Alice. Alan and the kidnapper reach Lover's Peak, the meeting point. There, the kidnapper reveals himself fully. He has been reading Alan's manuscript, knows many details. He demands the full manuscript in exchange for Alice's life. He gives Alan a deadline, only 2 days to bring him the manuscript. There is a confrontation. Alan punches him. They have a physical alteration. The kidnapper escapes. He must collect the lost manuscript pages, finish writing, or somehow fulfill the kidnapper's demands. After the encounter, Alan tries to return to his cabin, moving through darkness, Taken, traps, environmental hazards. He must use light, flashlight, flares, and all his weapons. On the way, he also gets a call from Barry, who warns him of danger, birds gathering around the cabin, and Rose trying to locate Alan's missing manuscript pages. Also, Alan drives back using the vehicle at some parts. Eventually, he reaches the cabin. There is one last fight with the Taken. including a flock of crows. Alan survives and Barry opens the door to the cabin, apologizing for not believing Alan earlier. Alan and Barry arrive at the sparkling river estates. They are looking for Rose, who may have information of Alice Wake's disappearance. The site manager, Randolph, shows them around and leads them towards Rose's trailer. Along the way, Alan learns more background. Thomas Zane used to own Diver's Isle. Zane had a lover, Barbara Jagger, who drowned a week before Zane disappeared. This connects to a strange presence in the lake. At Rose's trailer, Alan and Barry knock. Rose invites them inside. Rose offers them coffee. Alan and Barry drink. Soon after, Alan and Barry lose consciousness. Rose's coffee was drugged. The scene transitions into a dream. While unconscious, Alan experiences a vision of hallucinations. Barbara Jagger, the drowned woman, appears speaking to Alan, hinting that she can help him save Alice if he follows her instructions. There is a sense that Barbara is compelling Alan to write or shape a story. The boundaries between reality and the supernatural start shifting. Alan wakes up from the vision, and Rose's trailer remains eerie. The TV turns on by itself, offering more cryptic cues about writing, authorship, and the dark present. With the drugging over, Alan escapes the trailer. Outside, he encounters immediate danger. Police are on his tail. He must flee. He runs through forested paths, under road bridges, avoiding searchlights and gunfire. The pursuit is intense. Sarah Breaker, the sheriff, is also nearby. Alan arrives at the KBFFM radio station with the hope of contacting someone, Pat Main, the radio host. Inside the station, he meets Pat Main, but before things can calm down, Agent Nightingale shows up, along with the Sheriff Breaker. A tense confrontation ensues. Nightingale is aggressive, trying to provoke Alan. Shots are fired, but nothing hitting Alan. Panic ensues. The chaos gives Alan an opportunity to escape. Alan jumps out a window to invade the chaos and continue fleeing into the woods. After escaping the radio station, Alan heads towards the train depot. On this path, he must navigate environmental hazards and enemies. Alan's pursuit leads towards Mirror Peak Lookout. The path takes him through increasingly surreal and dangerous terrain. First a ghost town, then more ruins, then a silver mine. In the silver mine, Alan hears Alice's voice echoing in the tunnels below Cauldron Lake. The environment distorts, reality seems to warp. There are split tunnels, collapsing paths, enemies emerging from dark corners. Alan battles through the mine, using light to hold back the darkness, collecting more manuscript pages, navigating hazards. Eventually, he exits the mine and approaches the lookout. Near the Mirror Peak Lookout, Alan confronts Ben Mott, who had been tortured. Mott reveals that he doesn't have Alice. This was some cruel trick. Alan is emotionally charged. Suddenly, the dark presence appears in a dangerous, almost metaphysical form, often described as a tornado of darkness. It attacks Mott, tearing him apart. Alan is next in its path. Alan uses a flare to fend off the dark force. After being thrown downward towards Cauldron Lake, at the last moment a hand reaches up from the lake, pulling him out. Alan regains consciousness in Cauldron Lake Lodge, under Dr. Hartman's care. Hartman claims Alan has been drugged. He tells Alan that his memories, or what Alan believes, are possibly delusional. Specifically, Hartman suggests Alice really drowned in Cauldron Lake, and Alan's instances otherwise is a refusal to accept his grief and guilt. As Alan walks around the lodge under Hartman's guidance, the player sees patients, nurses, and the Anderson brothers. Various signs of confusion or dementia among the inhabitants, which increases the sense of instability. We are yet sure how much is real versus manipulated. Alan meets the Anderson brothers inside the lodge rec room. They say things like this place is real and encourage Alan to go to their farm for answers. But their statements are fuzzy. They seem confused themselves, dementia or medication induced. The player is uncertain whether they are trustworthy. Alan tries writing on the typewriter in his room, but can't make himself begin. The paralysis of doubt, possibly induced by Hartman's influence. Alan hears a disturbance, shouting commotion coming from downstairs, with the patients and staff misbehaving. The Andersons assault a nurse. A fight occurs. The lodge becomes chaotic. Alan is distracted and decided to try to uncover something. Alan discovers Barry Wheeler locked in a closet. Barry had come to take Alan away, but apparently got assaulted by Hartman's goons. Alan frees Barry. Barry still appears loyal and concerned. Together, Alan breaks into Hartman's office. There he finds stolen manuscript pages and takes a revolver. Hartman shows up, tries to convince Alan to join in, to accept Hartman's version of things. That what Alan is doing, writing, believing is part of his mental breakdown. Alan doesn't accept it. He locks Hartman in the office and flees when he sees the dark presence getting stronger. Once Alan flees, the lodge seems to disintegrate into supernatural ways. Objects flying, rooms shifting, darkness overtaking spaces, and taking. Poltergeist-style enemies appear. The supernatural threat is more overt here in this episode than in some prior ones, especially in the lodge itself. Alan goes through a head mage outside in the grounds of the lodge to reach Barry. He must fight Taken, use his flashlight, avoid traps, navigate confusing paths. After reuniting with Barry, they escape the lodge by car. The lodge is shown as being overrun by Taking. Darkness pouring out from windows and doors. It's a visual of collapse, as if Alan's internal world is breaking. Alan and Barry head toward Anderson Farm, a suggestion by the Anderson brothers. Alan theorizes that Alice is trapped underneath Cauldron Lake, that the location itself is special, that works of art created there have more power, and that the dark presence is using that fact to manipulate reality. During the drive to the farm, they encounter falling rocks. Their car crashes off a cliff. Alan wakes up injured. Barry is stuck, but survives. After the crash, Alan makes his way on foot towards the Anderson farm to find Barry. He passes through woods, fights Taken, uses light to fend off dangers. Arriving on the farm, Alan reunites with Barry. They explore the farmhouse. In one focal moment, there's a gathering defense on the stage. They fight waves of Taken while a song, Children of the Elder God by Old Gods of Asgard, plays in the background. Alan and Barry also get drunk on the Anderson brothers' moonshine one night, and Alan's memories of the night Alice disappeared are pushed to the surface into writing a manuscript that empowered the dark present. But Alan, while weakened, wrote in Thomas Zane as a character to help facilitate an escape plan. This memory sequence is a major turning point, the missing week that Alan was writing, what was real versus what was manipulated. The episode ends with Alan realizing that the events are getting too dangerous, that the dark presence is growing stronger, and with Agent Nightingale arriving at the farm, having tracked Alan. As Alan is drunk or confused, Nightingale points a gun at him. It's not just the supernatural threat anymore, now law enforcement is involved, and Alan's version of the story, reality, is under scrutiny. Alan wakes up in a cell in the sheriff's station with Barry. Agent Nightingale enters, claiming Alan has enough evidence to be charged with conspiracy and murder of a federal agent. Sarah Breaker intervenes, asking to speak with his superior. Tension escalates. Alan collapses during the confrontation. Nightingale is suspicious of Alan, but suddenly is pulled away, literally taken by the darkness, showing the supernatural has real physical impact even on law enforcement. Sarah tells Alan that she will trust him, or at least allow him to act. Breaking away from Nightingale's hostility, she also says Alan's things are in her office. Alan and Sarah prepare. They plan to reach Cynthia Weaver. They need to get out of the station, get to the helicopter, to get to the old Bright Falls power plant, where Cynthia is. The mission is now clear. Reach Weaver, get the well-lit room she's been guarding. Alan and Sarah move through the cells, out of the back of the station. They reach street level via scaffolding and roof pass, then must open a gate via control mechanism. The gate controls were damage affected by the darkness. Alan must burn away the darkness covering them. Sarah helps. Once on the street, Alan and Sarah fight through Taken in Bright Falls. They go to the town hall to retrieve helicopter keys, with numerous ambushes. At the church, there is a basement passage, an attempt to proceed to the fire station where the helicopter is. Alan, Sarah, and Barry reach the fire station. They must hold off waves of Taken while Sarah tries to start the chopper. Barry jumps in early. Alan must defend the helipad against an incoming horde. A tornado of darkness forms on a hill above, carrying steel rods, puncturing the ground everywhere around them. Alan barely makes it to the copter. In the helicopter, they fly towards Bright Falls, Light and Power. Sarah and Alan talk. Sarah mentions personal background. Her father used to work in New York. She teased he was Alex Casey, a fictional writer, hero, author figure in the game's lore. The chopper gets attacked by flocks of ravens. Alan falls from the helicopter, landing near a warehouse parking lot. He's separated from Sarah and Barry temporarily. Alan fights through the transformer yard, close-quarter fights using lights to clear the darkness. Overhead helicopter support helps. He uses bridges, rotating platforms, control buildings, and pass through the dark zones. Alan reaches Cynthia Weaver at the entrance of the power plant. Cynthia is reluctant, asking for proof that Alan is the person of the light, or someone worthy. Alan tells her about the legends, about Zane, about her role. Cynthia tells him that the power is being sucked by a transformer yard, which is making traversal unsafe. Alan must cut the power, shut down certain switches so the darkness loses its hold. As Alan and Cynthia move through pipes toward the well-lit room in the dam, Alan receives a call from Barry. They hear a helicopter crash. Alan insists on going to the crash site even though Cynthia says there is no time. Alan runs down past battling ravens in a take into the crash site, but find it's empty. He sees a flare gunshot. Eventually, Alan, Sarah, and Barry regroup, and they race up to the top of the dam. There is an elevator. Then more Taken attacks. Alan reaches the top of the dam, where there is a military-grade searchlight. He uses a powerful light source to fend off massive waves of Taken. At this moment, the Dark Presence speaks, manifests, declaring Alan will go no further. After fending off the waves, he follows Cynthia and Sarah down into the well-lit room. Inside, in the center, there is a shoebox that holds a manuscript page. The page reveals a childhood memory Alan's mother made about the clicker. This piece of his past is tied to his ability to resist darkness, not just physically, but psychologically. The clicker is symbolic. It represents Alan's earliest trust in light, and simple means to push back fear. Realizing this, Alan is better prepared emotionally, psychologically for what lies ahead. The episode ends with them inside the well-lit room, a safe haven, but the sense that things are closing around them, the final confrontation is coming. Alan leaves Barry, Sarah, and Cynthia in the well-lit room to travel alone towards Cauldron Lake and the cabin. He drives alongside rural roads, passing logging areas, trailers, and sawmills. He collects supplies along the way. He approaches a tunnel which is blocked for vehicles. After emerging from the tunnel, Alan is attacked again. He finds a car, drives on, passing motels, ghost towns. The sections are typical Alan Wake sequences, traverse semi-open terrain while guarding against darkness, scavenging supplies. Alan experiences more supernatural interference. A major confrontation occurs with a giant tornado of darkness swirling with debris, boats, planes, etc. Alan fires multiple flares into its core to destroy it. Once the tornado dissipates, Alan jumps, plunges into the lake. This is the narrative high point. It's the final battle, externalization of the dark presence power over their environment. After plunging into the lake, Alan finds himself in what feels like a dream or illusion. He's back in an apartment setting, with Alice blocking his path in rooms, urging him to say to accept this world. In this illusion, a glowing word, clicker, appears. Alan uses his flashlight to shine on that word, causing the clicker to materialize. He picks it up. Upon doing so, the illusion breaks. Alan finds himself underwater in a kind of intermediary realm, with Thomas Zane in a diving suit guiding him. This interlude is where reality and metaphor blur. The clicker introduced earlier is invoked as a symbol, tool of illumination and resistance. In a dark place, Alan is threatened by Mr. Scratch, a doppelganger or dark mirror of himself. Intended by the dark presence to take Alan's place, Zane warns him to ignore Mr. Scratch. Alan proceeds through surreal terrain where floating words or phrases appear in the environment. By shining light on those words, he triggers them to become physical, manifest, or to open up roots forward. He follows the word-guided path towards a replica of the cabin. As he nears it, he witnesses a vision of Thomas Zane cutting out Barbara Jagger's heart. Alan uses the clicker by inserting it into that hole and turning it on. The act destroys Jagger, or her manifestation. Then he ascends upstairs in the cabin to find a typewriter. He understands that to close the story, he must finish writing the manuscript in a way that balances the forces, that allows Alice to escape but demands a sacrifice. He sits at the typewriter. This is the metaphysical finale. Alan must assert authorship over the narrative, accept that writing has consequences, and choose a path not simply. Alan concludes that balance is required. The world demands that every force is matched, every act has a price. Therefore he chooses to remain behind in the dark place so that Alice can return to the real world. Alice emerges from Cauldron Lake onto a broken pier, calling Alan's name. The world seems to resume. Deerfest is happening, and the various characters, Rose and the Anderson brothers, appear, celebrating. Rose is seen holding Cynthia Weaver's lantern. Meanwhile, Alan is back in the cabin, typing the closing words of the manuscript. It's not a lake, it's an ocean. His face appears blank, his eyes empty. The last shot shows him in the cabin, trapped in the dark place. The ending is poignant and ambiguous. Alice is saved, but Alan sacrifices himself, or remains behind, in a liminal realm. The dark presence may still hold him. The cabin remains a threshold. The final phrase is, it's not a lake, it's an ocean. A metaphor, and possibly literal in the context of thresholds, that suggests far bigger, deeper powers at work. It underlines the ideal that the dark place, Cauldron Lake threshold, is much vaster and more dangerous than appears. Looking back on the story, chapter by chapter, or episode by episode, several things stand out. Many parts of the story are open to interpretation. What is real versus what is supernatural? What is a hallucination? What is a supernatural effect? The game repeatedly undermines Alan's certainty, which makes for a more unsettling atmosphere, but can also be frustrating. Alan is a writer. His creations, manuscript character stories become real or manifest. The game is very meta in this, the author trapped by his own writing himself into situations. Mechanically, the flashlight flares, light sources are weapons and tools. Symbolically, they represent knowledge, reality, safety. Darkness is fear, corruption, manipulation. The contrast drives both the gameplay and story. To rescue Alice, or at least give her a chance, Alan must give up something. He ends up trapped. Many in the supporting cast pay costs. Bright Falls, the forest, Cauldron Lake, the lodge, all contribute to a mood of foreboding. The episodic TV structure, the cliffhangers, the use of music and environmental build dread gradually. Thomas Zane's story, who had drowned, who had a wife, Barbara Jagger, serves both as an echo and possible template. Bright Falls' history, the lake's mythos. Each episode steadily raises the stakes, altering slower, more explorative segments with high tension combat sequences. Because you don't get everything at once, there's strong incentive to collect manuscript pages, talk to NPCs, explore. The supernatural threats are gradually revealed. The sound, lighting, and environment are excellent. Darkness feels dangerous, so light is precious. Alan's relationship with Alice, guilt, the cost of being forced into these situations, makes the narrative more than just a horror action. Unanswered questions can frustrate some players because they want more concrete answers. The ending leaves many threads unresolved. The logic of the supernatural dark place thresholds overlap illusions, sometimes stretches believability, or at least requires accepting a lot of mysticism without full explanation. Combat against Taken sometimes feels repetitive. Balancing narrative exploration and action is a tightrope. Bright Falls is one of the more memorable small towns with secrets in gaming. Combined with the forest, lake, cabin, lodge settings, Alan Wake deeply invokes mood. The game doesn't just have monsters, it has stories about writing, about control, about how fiction and reality play off each other. Manuscript pages, stories becoming real. David Lynch, Twin Peaks, echoes. These elements make it richer than a just survive the dark game. Characters like Thomas Zane, Cynthia Weaver, Barbara Jagger, and the Anderson brothers add depth. The mythos of the dark presence, the bright presence, the lake, gives a unique supernatural tapestry. Alice's motive is more than just save the spouse. Her fear of darkness, her relationship with Alan, how Alan is compelled by guilt for what he's done, are strong emotional threads. Alan's final sacrifice, becoming trapped in the dark place, works because it feels earned. Not all answers are given. It's not a lake, it's an ocean.